Mesopotamia, the gateway to humanity's mysteries. Amidst the vast Iraqi desert lie remnants of one of the oldest cultures the world has ever known, a civilization that gifted us writing, the wheel, and even the concept of time. But what about the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon? Did they really exist, or are they nothing but a beautiful legend? Today, we embark on a fascinating journey to understand not only the origins of this ancient civilization, but also the mysteries it left behind, a legacy of greatness and enigmas that deeply influenced how we view our history. Get ready to explore the cradle of civilization, where myths and facts intertwine in a captivating narrative. Mesopotamia, the tales of Babylon. For nearly 5,000 years, the sands of what is now Iraq have safeguarded traces of one of the most ancient cultures, the Sumerians. These were the people who gave us cuneiform writing, the wheel, and even the division of time into minutes and seconds. They mastered inhospitable environments, founded the first cities, celebrated the arts, and transformed myths into historical landmarks. Their caravans opened the earliest trade routes, and their stories echoed in sacred texts like the Old Testament. However, around 4,000 years ago, Sumerian greatness came to an end, leaving only fragments of memory buried in the sands until archaeologists unearthed them centuries later. The land between two rivers. At the heart of this narrative stand two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. According to Genesis, a river flowed out of Eden and divided into 4 branches, among them these 2 waterways. Thus arose Mesopotamia, a term coined by the Greek historian Polybius, meaning land between rivers. The annual flooding of these rivers fertilized arid soils, transforming them into the cradle of civilizations. The challenges brought by these floods forced the inhabitants to seek ingenious solutions, turning obstacles into opportunities for prosperity. The re-emergence of a lost culture. Until the 19th century, what was known of Mesopotamia came mainly from religious scriptures. That changed when French and British archaeologists began competing to excavate the region, unearthing secrets guarded for millennia. In this way, the glorious past of these people resurfaced, revealing to the world the origins of a civilization that played a decisive role in human development. With the generosity of their waters, the Tigris and the Euphrates enabled agriculture and, despite the floods, became vital allies to Sumerian life. Vestiges of the past. In bustling Baghdad, the Iraqi capital, it is still possible to perceive the legacy of the Sumerians. In the narrow alleyways and noisy markets, trade revives the spirit of the ancient caravan routes. Products like pomegranates from the north and traditional yogurt keep the cultural heritage alive. Even the clay jars used to store fresh water, a Sumerian invention from 5,000 years ago, are still in use. Although the Sumerian civilization has disappeared, its spirit remains in daily customs and archaeological discoveries. Origins shrouded in mystery. The origins of the Sumerians remain an enigma. Research indicates that they may have come from the fertile lands of Anatolia, thousands of kilometers away, where einkorn, a wild wheat essential for the earliest agricultural practices, was found. Recent studies show that these communities mastered sophisticated construction techniques, such as pillars adorned with reliefs similar to those at Göbekli Tepe. This suggests a long-standing cultural connection that laid the foundation for the rise of Sumerian civilization. Even before the Sumerians' ascent, villages like Tsaonu, from around 9,000 years ago, already showed signs of social organization. Although they had not yet mastered ceramics, they built mud brick houses on stone foundations and practiced agriculture that would later flourish with the Sumerians, including the first steps toward writing. Nature and spirituality. The Sumerians' relationship with nature was reflected in their art and religion. One example is an alabaster vase carved with wheat stalks and flocks of sheep, symbols of abundance. This piece also reveals the people's spiritual devotion. A procession of offerings to the goddess Inanna, received by a priest in ceremonial robes. The art of mastering. The water Sumer's prosperity depended on agriculture, which was only possible thanks to the control of the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They created advanced irrigation systems, canals, dams, and reservoirs to tame the floods. Additionally, they developed movable dams made of wood and clay to divert the waters during seasonal floods. These works not only protected the crops, but also ensured water for domestic and religious use. Thus, Sumerian engineering transformed a threat into a source of life, allowing abundant harvests, reaping wheat, barley, and millet twice a year, villages and their oases. Along the ancient canals, palm oases emerged. Similar regions existed in the Shatt al-Arab, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers meet. There, agricultural provinces flourished thanks to the fertility of the waters. Among labyrinths of reeds, small boats carried fishermen to villages that seemed untouched by time. In these communities, ancient traditions such as reed huts endured, a testament to the civilization that laid the foundations for urban life. In this way, the Sumerian legacy remains alive, influencing the daily lives of their descendants. Life in the marshes and the splendor of Ur. In the vast marshy plains of ancient Mesopotamia, the first societies built their homes ingeniously, using intertwined reeds with layers of earth. The reed stalks formed floors, roofs, and walls, while compact bundles of fibers served as sturdy pillars and beams. Approximately 5 millennia ago, around 40,000 fishermen and farmers transformed this hostile region into a habitable place. In fragile reed boats, they slowly made their way, turning the waterlogged soil fertile and productive. It was at this same time that fired bricks emerged as a remarkable innovation in the urban landscape. Once molded and hardened, they made it possible to build permanent structures. "Let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly," they would say at the time. With this technique, cities like Ur were built, along with legendary works such as the famous Tower of Babel, whose top, according to tradition, would touch the sky. The Tower of Babel became a mythical icon, but its real existence is still debated. Babylonian records and inscriptions mention the Etemenanki, a large ziggurat dedicated to Marduk, which may have inspired the biblical narrative. In Babylon, excavations have revealed traces of monumental temples that could be linked to this construction. The famous Hanging Gardens, also highlighted as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, continue to generate debate. Some scholars claim they were in Babylon, while others point to Nineveh, suggesting that oral and written accounts amplified their fame and grandeur. The apex of Ur. When archaeologists began to explore Ur, they encountered astonishing discoveries. Narrow streets, vibrant squares, houses, warehouses, and temples that evidenced a sophisticated society. While Western Europe was still in prehistory, Ur already had around 34,000 inhabitants, demonstrating a high level of urbanization. Among the most emblematic structures was the ziggurat of Ur, built with fired bricks and covered with bitumen. It took approximately 5 years to complete, with the labor of about 1,500 people. Dedicated to the gods, its grandeur could be seen from 20 kilometers away, serving as a guide for travelers and merchants. Spirituality and commerce. Ur became an important religious and commercial center. Surrounded by fertile fields, it was strategically positioned for maritime trade in the Persian Gulf, exporting agricultural products and handicrafts to distant regions such as the Arabian Peninsula. The temple was the heart of everyday life, also functioning as an administrative and economic center. Behind walls 8 meters high, modest houses clustered irregularly to form a labyrinth of alleys. The streets, narrow and winding, lacked a sewage system. Despite their simplicity, the dwellings were well planned, usually built around internal courtyards that served as living spaces and provided ventilation. There were markets for the exchange of local and foreign goods. Near the temples, artisans such as potters and goldsmiths showcased their talents and stimulated the local economy. This urban structure reveals how the Sumerians balanced faith and practicality. Garbage was often burned or thrown into the streets. The houses, with discreet facades, had small doors and few openings to protect the residents from the heat and sandstorms. Some reached up to 3 stories, creating a characteristic urban landscape. The Death Pit and the Treasures of Puabi. In the year 1926, the archaeologist Leonard Woolley made a surprising discovery, the so-called Death Pit, where Queen Puabi was buried. She was entombed with more than 20 servants and guards who had been sacrificed, revealing complex funerary rituals and the belief in an afterlife. Among the most notable objects was the Standard of Ur, a precious Sumerian artifact. Featuring mother-of-pearl panels on lapis lazuli, it depicts scenes of peace and war. On one side, workers, slaves, and soldiers on parade. On the other, chariots crushing enemies and scribes celebrating victories. Ruins that tell stories today, the ruins of Ur stand as silent witnesses to an extraordinary civilization. Its temples, buildings, and artifacts continue to reveal the story of a people who shaped human destiny with their creativity, devotion, and technological advances. The enigma of the dams. Among the Sumerian legacies, ancient dams built far from the great rivers intrigued 19th-century archaeologists. How could they have functioned in such an inhospitable region? The answer began to emerge with excavations at Nippur, about 250 kilometers south of Baghdad. Clay tablets, detailed maps with temples, walls, and the diversion of the Euphrates River to supply the city. This engineering feat ensured an abundant water supply for the population. Over the centuries, changes in the terrain and the course of the rivers isolated some cities. Current research, using satellite images, has helped reconstruct Mesopotamia from 5,000 years ago. At that time, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flowed as one, before splitting, irrigating cities like Ur, Uruk, Nippur, and Girsu. This river system enabled the flourishing of civilizations in a region that now appears arid. Daily life in Ur. The day in Ur began at sunrise, ushering in a hot and intense routine. During the summer, it was common to sleep on rooftops to escape the suffocating heat. Houses were modest, generally with less than 70 square meters, according to archaeological records. Early in the day, the streets filled with activity. Merchants took advantage of the mild weather to attract buyers, while men gathered in courtyards to talk and drink beer with long straws, a well-documented practice. Customs and lifestyle. The climate influenced the way people dressed. The diet was varied thanks to the region's agricultural abundance. Bread, dates, and cereals formed the basis of the diet, accompanied by sheep meat and fish. Beer, invented by the Sumerians, was considered sacred and was filtered with straws to remove the residue. Ancient texts from Uruk describe recipes for stews and spiced dishes, revealing a refined cuisine. Men wore kaunakis, skirts made of sheepskin, that reached from the knees to the ankles. Women, especially the wives of rulers, wore light and colorful garments. Jewelry such as earrings, bracelets, and necklaces adorned both men and women. Even the humbler classes had access to imitations of gold and precious stones, underscoring the importance of sophistication at every social level. The craftsman's quarter, in the vicinity of the temple, were the areas designated for merchants, shopkeepers, scribes, masons, and carpenters. There were also residences for slaves, highlighting the rigid and hierarchical social structure of the time. The temple served as the political, economic, and religious center, radiating its influence over all spheres of urban life in Ur. The art and treasures of Ur excavations, carried out in Ur, revealed the impressive skill of Sumerian craftsmen. Experienced goldsmiths mastered sophisticated techniques such as chiseling and soldering precious metals. One of the most iconic finds is the Sumerian harp, richly decorated with shells and luxury stones. Instruments like harps, lyres, and flutes were essential in social festivities and religious rituals. Clay tablets show that musicians enjoyed great prestige, with many working directly in the temples. Music went beyond entertainment, holding profound spiritual value as a bridge between the human and the divine. Researchers have dedicated themselves to reconstructing these melodies based on notation systems discovered in Nippur, revealing a sophisticated musical tradition. The carved bull that adorns the instrument, with lapis lazuli eyes, represents something that transcends mere practical use, a symbol of eternity. Another highlight is the diadems found in the tombs of the servants sacrificed alongside Queen Puabi. Made of gold and precious stones, with interlaced leaves and golden flowers, they showcase the mastery of the craftsman and the deep symbolism present in Sumerian culture. Trade and its connections. Trade was one of the pillars of the Sumerian economy. The craftsmen produced items such as ceremonial cups and weapons using gold, lapis lazuli, and turquoise, materials that came from distant regions. The lapis lazuli, for example, arrived from the mountains of Badakhshan in present-day Afghanistan, approximately 3,000 kilometers away. The Sumerians became pioneers of international trade, establishing routes that traversed the east long before the famous Silk Road. These routes connected Mesopotamia to places such as the Indus Valley, Egypt, and even the Iberian Peninsula, according to some archaeological theories. Along these routes, exotic goods, precious metals, and even animals circulated, stimulating administrative innovations such as the creation of trade contracts. Contracts and the emergence of laws. To ensure the security of commercial exchanges, the Sumerians developed stone cylinder seals engraved in low relief. When rolled over wet clay, they left a unique mark that served to authenticate contracts and identify products. This device symbolized trust among merchants. The formalization of contracts paved the way for the development of legal systems. Although few Sumerian legal texts have survived, their influence is evident in the Code of Hammurabi, created in Babylon in 1694 BCE. Many of its principles, such as the famous Law of Retaliation, reflect legal practices inherited from the Sumerians, covering topics such as trade, marriage, and inheritance. Essential resources. Living in an arid environment, the Sumerians depended on the importation of essential materials, such as wood, obtained through expeditions to the cedar forests of Syria, Turkey, and Lebanon. Low reliefs depict workers cutting trees and transporting logs along rivers like the Euphrates. These journeys, which could last several months, required meticulous planning. The intensive use of these resources nearly devastated the forests completely, leaving only a few millennial trees as witnesses to the Sumerian environmental impact. Bitumen was also widely used to waterproof boats and buildings, demonstrating the ingenuity of this people. Mythology and the flood. The relationship with nature is also evident in Sumerian mythology. In the 19th century, researcher George Smith discovered a legend that inspired other narratives, such as the biblical flood. In this myth, Enlil, the supreme god, decides to annihilate humanity with a flood. But Enki, the protector of men, teaches Ziusudra to build a vessel and gather pairs of animals. After 6 days and nights of storm, Ziusudra releases a dove to check if the land had reappeared, but it returns. On the 8th day, he releases a raven that does not return, signaling the end of the catastrophe. This account is one of the earliest myths of resistance against the forces of nature, revealing the fear and respect the Sumerians had for the elements. An unforgettable legacy. The Sumerians left a profound legacy in history. Their ability to modify the environment, create laws, and expand trade was revolutionary. Many of their innovations still resonate in the modern Middle East. Whether in legends or practical solutions, the Sumerians represent the ingenuity of a people who turned challenges into an eternal heritage. The pantheon and Sumerian religion permeated every aspect of Sumerian society, connecting deities, people, and nature. The pantheon was extensive and multifaceted, with each god responsible for a specific function and associated with a principal city. Enlil, lord of the wind, ruled over the air, the earth, and the atmosphere, and was venerated at the Ikur temple in Nippur, considered the link between heaven and earth. He was regarded both as a protector and a destroyer. Enki, god of fresh water, wisdom, and creation, had his temple in Eridu, considered the oldest city. He was the protector of humanity, aiding them in critical moments, such as in the flood myth. Utu, god of the sun, justice, and truth, was worshipped in Lhasa and Sippar, serving as the guardian of contracts and oaths. Inanna, one of the most complex deities, represented fertility, love, war, and politics, with her cult centered in Uruk. Her myths, such as the descent into the underworld, reveal deep dimensions of spirituality and human relationships. Temples, called ziggurats, served not only as religious centers, but also as administrative and economic hubs. Festivals like the sacred marriage united the king and the high priestess in rituals symbolizing the fertility of the land and the union with the divine. On such occasions, banquets and sacrifices reinforced social and religious bonds, while the temples managed agricultural production, trade, and the distribution of goods, consolidating their central role in Sumerian urban life. Offerings and divine worship. For the Sumerians, the relationship with the gods was based on a system of exchanges. Men and women offered gifts and services in return for divine blessings and prosperity. Extensive records from Uruk reveal the grandeur of these offerings, from abundant breads and cakes to enormous quantities of mutton, beef, and lamb, as well as agricultural products and beer. This complex system required a vast network of workers, priests, scribes, artisans, and other servants who maintained not only religious devotion, but also the local economy. Although dedicated to the deities, the offerings sustained this entire structure of human workers. Gilgamesh, hero and king Gilgamesh, the fifth monarch of Uruk, holds a unique place in Sumerian history, blending historical and mythical characteristics. He ruled around the 3rd millennium BC, but his fame transcended centuries, making him the protagonist of the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest works of world literature. This text recounts not only his feats, such as the famous journey to the cedar forest to confront Humbaba, but also his lessons learned throughout life. His audacity provoked the wrath of the gods, especially Inanna, who sent the bull of heaven to punish him. However, the epic goes beyond adventures. It explores mortality and the meaning of existence. After losing his friend Enkidu, Gilgamesh sets out in search of eternal life, only to realize that immortality lies in what we leave behind for future generations. The fall, the fragility of a civilization. Sumer flourished for nearly 3 millennia, but its decline was gradual and driven by several interconnected factors: climate change, political pressures, and social tensions. Soil salinization. The irrigation system, which initially provided abundance, eventually harmed agriculture. Constant water evaporation in the fields created layers of salt on the surface, forming a crust that made wheat cultivation, the vital crop for the Sumerians, impossible. Between 2300 and 2200 BC, wheat production plummeted, forcing farmers to turn to barley, which was more resilient but less nutritious. As a result, vast fertile areas became barren lands, leading to the abandonment of many cities. To this day, the cracked soil of southern Iraq stands as a silent witness to this process, climate change and political conflicts. In addition to environmental issues, the region was also affected by changes in climate. Although Sumer lost its strength, its heritage persisted among successor peoples such as the Akkadians and Babylonians. Many of its cities were reoccupied and adapted, while cultural aspects like cuneiform writing continued to be used for centuries. This demonstrates that the collapse of a civilization does not erase its influence, but transforms it into a legacy. Studies indicate that prolonged periods of drought further reduced agricultural production. Meanwhile, city-states to the north, such as Akkad and Assur, competed for resources, and the already weakened Sumerian cities could not withstand the pressure. Finally, in 2004 BC, Ur fell to the Elamites, marking the end of an era. The Sumerian legacy. Even after the political disappearance of Sumer, its achievements echoed throughout history. Technological advances. The Sumerians invented cuneiform writing, which was fundamental for recording complex information, as well as mathematical tools that propelled engineering and architecture. Art and culture epics, such as that of Gilgamesh, had a profound impact on world literature. Many Sumerian myths, such as the Flood, were incorporated by later cultures, Akkadian, Assyrian, and Babylonian, and inspired the religious traditions of various peoples. Sumerian urban organization and administrative practices directly shaped the Babylonian Empire, while cuneiform writing adapted to laws and contracts essential for Mesopotamian societies. Their temples and artifacts, such as richly decorated harps and statues of deities, demonstrate great aesthetic and spiritual refinement. Social organization. The Sumerians established the foundations of legal and administrative systems that influenced subsequent generations. Their myths, such as the Flood and the Tower of Babel, continue to resonate in religious texts and cultural traditions to this day. The Sumerian trajectory reminds us of the duality of human progress. On the one hand, the capacity to transform the environment and build remarkable societies. On the other, the risk of straying from the natural balance. The history of Sumer serves as a timeless warning. Even the most advanced cultures can collapse in the face of the forces of nature and their own excesses. Yet, their legacy endures as proof of human creativity and the desire to attain meaning and immortality. Thank you for reading. I'm sure you will love one of the videos specially selected for you here on YouTube.